Hi, I'm Pastelist Avon Waters, and today I'm going to show you how to take pastel, a certain analogous set of colors that are side by side on the color wheel, and go from the underpainting to near finish. I'm going to use this sketch out of my sketchbook. This is a value study showing the darks and the lights, and that was transferred over in the previous episode. But we're going to take that and we're going to take analogous colors side by side on the color wheel, and any 3 to 5 colors on a color wheel that are side by side are considered analogous. So I'm going to concentrate on these 3 colors, but I have the ability to add a couple colors on each side of that. Now the opposite of these, which will help me make grays and change the values so things will go back in space and come forward in space. The opposite of these are a blue-green and this green that is here. So by mixing those with the colors up in here, I can create some grays that will make colors that are bright, put next to those grays, pop. So let's get started, and I'll show you how to work with analogous colors. Okay, in episode 7 last week, we did 3 different ways to start a pastel. We used alcohol in 2 of the methods. This was one of the alcohol methods, and then this was with charcoal in order to get the gray values. And then we used pastel colors using pastels from this palette here, and created shades and values that the alcohol over then produced something very sketchy and no real sharp edges. Just gave us a hint based on colors where the different values of these might go. And then we use water. This is the water, this is the alcohol, this is the water, alcohol, water. They appear a little bit different, and remember the water lets you move around the charcoal and make some grays slightly darker. You have more time where the alcohol evaporates. So now we're going to take one of those underpaintings, and I'm going to use the water version, and we're going to begin to apply color. And in previous episodes we've done a lot of mixing on the page. So the very first step with getting something done here is to get those colors in, something like what we did here with the color and then put alcohol over. But now we're going to just use the pastels and try to get the values being the lights and the darks, using some of these colors in here. Now you remember from our previous episode we also had our light source coming in from over in here, kind of behind, and this was going to be in the 1/3 mark. It's a little off on this particular drawing, but that was our goal, is to have some sort of highlighted area in there. And I can actually move that down some and over, even though, see how it's covering up the black charcoal? So pastel is really super easy to make corrections, even though you saw how that one with the alcohol and the color became very bright and brilliant. You are able to make some of those changes. Look at that, I just went right over that in order to try to move this over some. I went right over that black charcoal line. This particular edge isn't going to be as bright. This will be toned down as I add more color. But again, at this particular stage, once you get an area blocked in with your charcoal and you get your gray values, and to the edge I can use my drawing that was the gray tones, and you can see that the end of the building is a little bit darker, as is this here, but a little bit lighter than these edges here. This is the lightest, this is the second lightest, third, and fourth. So that's what we're after as we start to block in some of these different tonal values. The sky, you remember, in that sketch was darker. And by using a family of analogous colors, we start to build up some unity here that would not ordinarily be here. Because the colors are related, they're all in the color wheel next to one another. Now that looks as bright as that, but I did that intentionally because I'm going to put the opposite of the oranges and yellows are violets and blues. So I'm mixing a gray, and I'll put some more orange over that, and it will still have an orange cast. It'll be related to this, it'll be related to this and this, because all the colors are next to one another on the wheel, and the grays that you create by using the opposites will be what will help you keep those relationships. Now see how bright that red is? That almost maroon red? That brightness has to be toned down in order to be equivalent in a gray value. But we have to first lay it in, and then what's the opposite of red? Greens. And remember, we said our blue-green was one of the complements. Now see how that brightness, that vivid red really dies away and goes into the back? That's what we're after by layering. And we need to get some colors under there. Now we lose the red once we put the blue-green in there. And if we want to have the semblance of a red barn, I take this red-orange and I can go back into that. And again, we have harmonies because we are using colors that are related to one another in some way, either as complements or as analogous colors side by side on the color wheel. And I'm not going to use a whole lot of that blue because that's a pretty dark blue, but I want to get that toned down some too in comparison. I want to keep this my brightest color. And the best way to do that is to layer in some of these colors. Now I'm not making a lot of mark making. I'm doing what they would consider painting with the pastels, where you're using the side of the pastel. But I'm not doing a lot of mark making at this particular point. That will come later in order to create the textures and everything that we want to have in this painting. And we're not taking this painting all the way to finish. We're just trying to get you past the beginning stage where you block in a painting, and the next steps are to get it midway through the process. That's what we're after, is get that midway through the process. And you see, even as I start to lay in these colors, this is a little more of a muted. See how those blues, the opposite of orange, are creating some grays that we can deal with underneath there. It's all about relationships. It's all about trying to create those darks and lights and middle tones and make the painting start to make sense. And the front of this building is also in shade, since our sun source is coming from up above, not quite midday, maybe more like the 1 or 2 o'clock area, just enough to lighten up this part of the barn and really hit this at almost a 90-degree angle. And I can keep separation between this and this and not let it pop out and become too bright by keeping some of those grays and complements together. Maybe we got some trees going off at an angle. I'm a colorist. I'm not using realistic color. This barn would create a shadow out in this area. I just erased the bottom of this, and now I've got the front end of the building going up. But again, pastel is really easy to make some corrections on. So we'll just come back in here and bring that front of that building back down into here. As you can see how this now is starting to have relationships. Now we got it all blocked in. You're starting to get those relationships despite the colors not being realistic. And that's what we're after. We're after trying to create those things we saw in the charcoal that were grays. We're trying to see those things as colors that have relationships towards a darker and a lighter color. And then we do that by creating grays in our color combinations. Now you'll see I'm starting to do some mark making, trying to follow and think about how the shingles or the roofing on this particular shed might go out. And you got an eave that's got a little shadow there. It's probably a little sharper than that, so you could create that sharpness. And I could have vertical siding or I could have horizontal siding. But I've opted to make my mark making go with the direction of vertical siding. And we said we have blue greens. Blue greens are our opposite. We can mix those because we have used a blue by using a blue-green, making some marks and letting some of those colors come through. We are able to create more interest in shadows that normally might not have the interest that you would see. Now this is a different color than this, but it's in the same family because it's analogous colors. When I start doing some mark making, then you can see that it pairs up nicely with that red. This is slightly different color. I can mix that into there. I can grab a lighter color. This is almost a white. Probably looks white on your screen, but the lack of definition isn't letting you see that it has kind of a creaminess to it. But see how that popped against this? That's because this is so much lighter and this has been grayed down rather than be a bright red or a bright orange. And it's that graying that helps us create these separations that we're looking for. And because they're part of the same family, I can mix these colors right along. These different oranges, reds, blues, blue-greens, all these colors go together, except for these are opposites, to dull these down if they're too bright. But the violets and the oranges and the reds and the red violets, these are all related colors on that color wheel. And that's what we're after, is to begin as we start to lay in color after we've gotten something blocked in with our charcoal. We can begin to start to make relationships, and underneath the trees, off in the distance, as this goes off, we want it to go off kind of at an angle back in that direction. And we'll go vertical. You can firm up all these lines and make tree trunks, and you can make all sorts of things happen later on. I'm going to make some marks here. Remember, our sunlight's coming in this way, hitting that. That means the sunlight's also hitting the outer edges. If these are clumps of trees, it's also hitting the outer edges of branches and things coming out of this area of trees here in the background. All very loose, all very non-distinct at this particular point. But that's the goal, is to try to create some of these variations before you go into the next step and try to do some finishes. Now, this is our make-believe sky and color. I had just one solid color up in that area there, and we want to make this appear that the sky, rather than go straight up, we want the sky to come this way. And typically, if you look at your photograph, your source photograph, and in my case it was a drawing, typically you have the sky lighter down near the horizon, and it gets darker as it goes up overhead. And we can create that. We have to do some blending, but we can create that by joining these 2 and 3 different values of this red that I selected out. Now, as the sky goes up over our head, it has more blue in it because there's less atmosphere. And I'm just going to very lightly stick some of this blue in here, which makes it a red-violet. Red-violet is right there on our color wheel. And at this point, I would use various tools. We're starting to get past the middle part of finishing this picture, because now we're starting to get some things and elements into this. That's all I'm going to do right now on this, and you can see how this particular picture, using analogous colors, can come together. You can read the different planes that are there, even the trees going off and the sky coming down and the shadows in here. This shadow, if I were to work on this some more, this shadow would become a little lighter as it goes away from the structure. But right now this shadow is just in the early stages with just a couple different variations of blues and blue-greens and violets in here. And what it has to do is stay darker up next to the base of the barn and gradually get a little lighter as it moves out. And the same for where sunlight might be coming across this way and down. This area in here would need some work, as do the trees and everything else. But you can see just basically from this, once you get your wash done, once you get something blocked in and you have some lights and darks that inform you what is gray, what is middle tone, what is highlight, you're able to use basic colors in some color scheme or color palette you've picked out, in this case analogous, those that are right beside one another. You are able to see how those colors can relate to one another in the darkest dark to the lightest light to the middle gray values if you were to take a picture of this in black and white. Okay, that's it. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got something out of it. We will see you next time. If you like the content you're getting with this, please hit the subscribe button and follow along and not miss anything, the notification bell. If you are liking this and you don't want to subscribe, that's fine. At least hit the like button so the algorithm will show it to more people. Alrighty, until next time, happy painting. Bye-bye.